So I'm going to go into this on two different levels today. I'm going to talk about just how to get started and an introductory basic, and then I'm going to also take it a step further for anyone who has some experience fermenting is looking for ways to make it more interesting. So I'm going to start with the how and why of all of this, starting with the term lacto fermentation. So lacto often makes people think dairy. We are not working with dairy. Lacto is referring to the lactobacilli bacteria, which is a major component in making most of your fermentations safe and bringing forward that acidic flavor in them. It's really fundamental to this type of ferment is the lactobacilli. So the why are we fermenting our food? Not only adding an interesting flavor profile, but also such a beautiful natural way to propagate probiotics. So probiotics are definitely having a moment. I think there's really exciting stuff happening on the study of the microbiome. We're all realizing that it's really important for us to have healthy probiotics in our diets, and they are lacking. With the invention of refrigeration, the practice of fermenting our food has really been threatened in our culture. But we're not doing anything new. We're actually getting back to ancient techniques that have been popular in a variety of cultures around the world throughout history. You think about Japanese kimchi, even going back to beer, wine, bread, cheese, olives, all of these familiar things, hot sauce, they're fermentations. So we're certainly not doing anything new or scary. So I want to talk about how to know that we're safe. We're doing fermentation safely. So let's touch upon probiotics and their health benefits. Most people are familiar with them to a certain degree now, but I want to point out how that relates to fermentation itself. So I highly recommend getting a variety of probiotics in different ways. So there's a lot of different doctors and scientists telling you different things about probiotic pills, surviving stomach acid versus cultured food. I think the answer comes down to get all of it. I like having a good probiotic supplement on hand. I like doing some kefir, some cabbage, some carrots, grains. Variety is beautiful when it comes to gut health and getting those healthy probiotics into the right places in our system. So what are these healthy probiotics doing to our food? What's the biological process that's happening, and why is it so good for us? So your beneficial probiotic bacteria are pre-digesting your food. So if somebody might have a bit of an intolerance to cabbage, like cabbage always makes me gassy, gives me a bad stomach, they can try doing some fermentation, because the healthy bacteria is eating the prebiotic food and creating a more assimilable product, and even creating its own vitamins. There have been studies showing that it's actually creating B vitamins that weren't in this cabbage before. It's releasing some of the minerals if you're fermenting nuts. All of these good things are happening. So as far as keeping your fermentation safe, it's important to know that we're doing basically the opposite of canning. So in canning, you're wiping out all of your bacterial populations. And what happens sometimes is when you get that high heat, you wipe out everything except for the one strong guy, the botulism, who releases a spore at that high heat. And now he has no competitors. And I think this is a great example of what happens in our bodies when our positive populations aren't there to counteract our negative populations. We're creating a symbiosis. So lactofermentation, on the other hand, you're propagating your positive bacteria who love an acidic environment that's anaerobic, without oxygen. And with that, the bad guys can't exist. So you don't need to start off with a sterile environment for them. Just clean. Wash your hands, wash your tools, wash your jar. It doesn't need to go through the dishwasher and get heat sterilized. We're dealing with something that is that safe. So it can also work in making your vegetables that might have come in contact with even some organic fertilizer that may have some manure, some pathogenic bacteria on it. We're rinsing that off, but it's still on there. And with fermentation, you're taking that further. Your good stuff is working against even that organic fertilizer. And there have been some studies showing how it works against pesticides. So I do recommend going with a good organic vegetable, but we use what we have. And if you're unsure of your source of any vegetable, fermentation is going to be better for you in either way. Not saying you have to eat everything fermented. I like raw and cooked food too. Let's see. So when you're doing your fermentation, there are several ways to do it. And if you look online, you're going to find all sorts of recipes, and everyone's got an opinion. And so look at all of them and find your way through it. And I'm going to share with you what's worked for me. And what's worked for me has been making it in small batches, where I can create a variety of different things that my family can consume in a shorter period, and not working with top spoilage. So I did this one on purpose. This is only a couple of days old. It's going to continue getting worse because it's not submerged. So we've got this little layer on top. See where you start to get a little discoloration and browning? Basically because oxygen is still working on it and that surface is exposed. I'm going to show you how to submerge beneath the brine that's going to create a really clean ferment. If yours doesn't do that, I wanted to show you it's still okay. What's happening under here is still perfectly safe. So especially Eastern Europeans making sauerkraut and the big crocks, have you ever seen those? That top layer has mold on it. And discoloration, oxygen exposure, scrape it off, you eat what's underneath. So this isn't an throw away the whole batch. Just get the good stuff underneath. And this is all about trusting your senses, your sight, your smell. Get down into those human instincts will tell you whether it's safe to eat or not. If something's spoiled, we have senses for that. You'll know when it's unappealing. But that doesn't usually happen. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make a very basic sauerkraut. So we're working with our co-host Tally Farms. They grow these gorgeous, huge Napa cabbages. It's kind of a lot to work with. And it's a lot to go through in a week. So we're doing this to show you how to work with food preservation to make that go further and create something interesting. So start by cutting your cabbage right in half. I have to make this last through a couple classes. So you're going to take it in half, cut out your solid core. Same thing if you're using a regular green or red cabbage. I like to cut out that solid part because it just doesn't meet the texture of the rest once it's involved in its fermentation. I'll move that so you can see. So there's no exact science to this. You're creating more surface area. So rather than putting in a whole carrot, it's nice to put it into slices. You're creating more surface area for that vegetable to ferment. But other than that, a little bit larger cut, you're going to get a little more crunchy bite. Just think about what shape you want it to be when you incorporate it in your recipe or just taking it by the forkful. So you can do a couple nice little slices, whatever amount you want. Chopping through. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Adding into a large bowl. And we're salting to taste. So you'll see some recipes that are going to call for exact amounts. That doesn't always work because not all salts are the same. And some of my favorite salts are very salty. So one of my favorites, Redmond Real Salt, comes from Utah. Mineral rich, wonderful, very salty. Himalayan, and we also carry a Celtic salt. The quality of your salt matters. Main thing to avoid is iodized, can affect and be detrimental to your good bacteria. Other than that, the healthier the salt, the better. If it's what you want to put on your dinner table, then it's good enough for your fermentation. So salt it like you're making a stir fry. Just put a layer of cabbage down, put the amount of salt on that particular vegetable that you would if you were dining on it. cut through your next layer, put down a couple inches, salt that however much you would that amount until your bowl is full. Get your hands down into it and give it a little mixing massage to evenly distribute the salt, but also to start getting those juices out of it. Breaking the cell walls, to start to work on that. And then we're placing a plate over the top. Make it a happy Christmas plate or whatever makes you smile. Place it over the top of your full bowl of cabbage and place some sort of weight on top. This is my weight. I just wanted to bring it to show you kind of like how heavy is okay. You can use a large sterilized rock, another bowl filled with water, whatever works to put some pressure on it. And once you have that pressure on it, so this has been sitting since about noon today. Let me move it over so you can see it better. So you can see how much beautiful briny juice comes out of that Napa cabbage. One of my reasons for really using the Napa, but I've seen even just the green head of cabbage, when it comes right out of the garden, can give off a nice juice like that too. If you don't get that nice juice, it's okay too. I think this is ideal, but you can still achieve a sauerkraut with a nice flavor by supplementing with a salt brine. So just mix a salt water to about the consistency that you find tasty. And a good rule of thumb, after you've salted to where you would normally for your stir fry or whatever vegetables, give your cabbage a taste and see if you need to add usually a little bit more. It should taste kind of like if you've ever unfortunately tasted a Lay's potato chip, it should taste like a salty potato chip, just a little bit saltier than you like your food. So this has been sitting for about, 4 hours. It can sit up to overnight, and sometimes the cabbage does need to sit overnight to get its maximum juice out of it. So once we've got all that nice stuff going, we're going to start to pack our jars. Like I said, I'm doing this increment by increment, little imagination as we try to do several classes. So taking a handful of your cabbage at a time, start to fill the jar. I like wide mouth mason jars. I do understand I have pretty small hands. I can actually put my hand down in and tamp it down. So we're doing layer by layer to make sure all of that oxygen gets out and we create kind of a solid foundation. Should your hand not fit in the jar, well, it's kind of nice to have something like this on hand anyway. This is, you can get them, if you look up muddling sticks, you can find that kind of thing online. But anything this shape, I do recommend using wood. Metallic surfaces can leach. So even when looking at what forks you're using, what serving implements that you're using in your jar, I do recommend wood. So we tamp on down, keep on filling handful by handful until you're a couple of inches from the top. Now this is very important to leave about 20% of head space because it will keep on getting juicier and bubblier, and they often overflow. So you might want to start off putting it on a little bowl or plate anyway in case you get some of that overflow, is not uncommon. But once you get used to knowing your level, all of mine are pretty far down when they start. You don't have to worry about it so much. So you've got your jar full. Now let's talk about keeping it submerged below the surface. There's a couple of popular ways to do that. You can take a couple of the outer leaves of the cabbage and hold those aside from when you're beginning. And once your jar is full, we're tucking that down in. Pretend my cabbage is around there. And you press that cabbage down to tuck all of your solids down below. Then you can take some of the brine and pour that over the top. But I love these little pebbles, little pickling pebbles. They come in all different sizes. Lots of people are making them. Look on it. I'm going to look for them. I'm going to look for them. So I have an email list that you can let me know what you're interested in, and I'll let you know when we get them in stock. So these little pebbles, Remember, jar is full, you press them down on top. And these are really useful when you're doing something like cauliflower that likes to kind of get away from you. You're weighing down as much as you can. Wipe the inside of the jar. We're looking for none of our solids to be exposed to air. And again, top it off with any extra brine, staying 20% below. Now there's a lot of lid options as well. Personally, I'm kind of fascinated by my fermentations. I don't mind babysitting them quite a bit. So your first few days, you might see a lot of activity. They might need to be what's called burped twice a day. If that's seeming like high maintenance and you want to look for something that isn't going to require so much babysitting, there are so many options. There's a jar called a pickle-it that looks like this kind of jar. Even these are a little bit better. They do kind of off-gas themselves a bit, and then you can easily bump them like that. There's the airlocks that are used for brewing. You put a little water in it and it lets off a bubble. You have to just keep that water level in there. You can get a cap for the mason jar that's a little pour spout, little plastic spout. Those fit right on top. That's another inexpensive, great way to go. But you want to just go home and get started? Just get a mason jar. Burp it. Super simple. Now you can get a little layer of wax paper, cut a circle out. The salt and acidity of the fermentation tends to corrode the lids pretty quickly. You want to keep that from happening. You can just change out the lid, but a little layer of wax paper is helpful too. So as your ferment starts, you're just leaving it on the counter, room temperature. You're going to notice a big variety depending on the temperature of your house. They might ferment faster during the summer, slower during the winter. So telling you exact time on how your ferment's going to be ready is close to impossible. It's just the type of vegetable you're using, and all of these different factors come into it. Exactly. Again, using your senses. So at first you start to get really bubbly like a soda pop, and you can see it needs to be burped. It's like opening. You get that effervescent kind of quality. These jars are nice because you can kind of tell when the pressure starts to build. You get a little domed on top. Time to open it up. So I do like keeping it sealed. You can do it wide open, but keeping that tight seal on it helps all of those gases that are coming in is pushing out the oxygen, and you're creating an oxygen-free environment where not even your surface liquid gets any funk to it. Now, if you want to just leave that part way open and you're doing a week-long fermentation, very well could be fine. If it's not, strain it off, use what's underneath. So the first week or so you might see really active. It starts to slow down. At that point, it's a really good time to test it. Open it up, take off your cabbage or your pickle stones, take a little taste. See if it's the texture and the sourness that appeals to you. So as it goes along, it's just going to get more and more sour, and the vegetable will break down and get softer. Any questions there?
Some people put oil on top, like a layer of oil, and that helps keep the air out. Have you ever heard of that?
I have. I think that works really well on making like miso and grains, anything that's got a squishy texture that doesn't have its own brine. You can put oil over the top, and that will give the same effect of keeping it submerged. Yeah, good question. Do we all feel like we can make sauerkraut now? Okay, then I just want to touch upon encouraging to be creative with other flavors. We've got some great yogurt and kefir starters. You get your good, healthy raw milk or your goat's milk, heat it up. You just need a little thermometer to tell you what temperature is at. There's easy directions. Put it in a jar. In the morning, you have yogurt. It couldn't be easier. And then you can see what strains you have going on, and you know that you're not dealing with something that's pasteurized and void. You know what you're working with. Then you get to control if you want to add some honey, some blueberries, whatever to it. Now, if you're actually doing a sweet fermentation, some can be done with honey. Mead is a real thing, but honey is an antibiotic in itself. So working with a palm sugar, brown sugar. I think Paul might be superior, but anything like that is going to give you a better result most of the time.
Once you make your first batch, can you use that as the starter for the next batch, or do you need to buy another?
And it depends on the companies. We did talk to the reps of one of the starters that we have, and they said 4 batches is comfortable, taking a couple tablespoons of your current batch, transferring it to the next for about 4 batches. And after that, you start with the powder again. Now, you can also get a hold of some kefir grains. They get passed down like heirloom sourdoughs. So that will keep your yogurt going. But you don't, it's a wild fermentation as well, so you don't know what strains are happening exactly. Sometimes it's less strains that are in the powdered, some of the powdered starters, from what I understand. So both have its advantages. So here I've got just a couple things. I've got some pickled peas, ginger bug, bok choy kimchi. And when I made the bok choy kimchi, there was so much liquid off of it that it was too much to put in the jar. And look how much liquid I have for vegetables. And I poured off to make this, just some onions, carrots, and peppers. And these carrots all came off the liquid of that bok choy. Now, I could have done these with a brine, but I had brine from a watery vegetable. I like that even better. So I just took some carrot slices, garlic, dill. And you can see it's already fizzy and bubbly. That's just about 3 days old. And those little bubbles are when the magic's happening. I did, and I'm going to be sending you recipes for the bok choy kimchi, completely interchangeable with cabbage. It's just a little bit milder in flavor, a little more water. And the liquid that comes off of it once you've mixed in all the spices makes an awesome hot sauce. After I eat through this, I'll take that liquid and just drain it straight into a bottle. You get hot sauce too. This I did with, this is pickled cauliflower. It did have dill to it. I let the dill sprigs stay in until it was the flavor I wanted, then went ahead and pulled them out. Now this is a good 4 months old. You can see that the cauliflower isn't completely keeping its integrity. It's a little soft at this point. Still wonderful and healthy. When I first had it, it had this great crunch, this great mouth to it. And at this point, I kind of like to put a couple tablespoons over a salad. Like that. Something else that adds that crunch back in. A husband favorite. This is the sauerkraut recipe. I got all the way to this stage with just the cabbage, and then sliced up carrots, radish, beets, minced up garlic, and a bunch of grated ginger. Put that in, and then packed the jars with that to make kind of a kimchi. I think there's some cayenne pepper in there as well. You can make it just as hot as you like. That's what's great about it. You can so personalize. I just want to encourage you to completely explore and know so many different things can work. This is a red cabbage sauerkraut. And for those who don't think that sauerkraut's appealing, you can ferment your sweet vegetables too. This is a fennel and apple chutney in cherry juice. So good. And something that might be more appealing to children who aren't finding the sauerkraut juice appealing to at first. I'll give you that recipe as well. So just explore, play with it. Grains, yogurts, kefirs, all of this stuff, get some variety in. One thing I do want to say is they are a powerful digestive aid. So even if that sauerkraut tastes so good, until your system is used to it, start off with a couple of tablespoons, about 2 tablespoons before a meal, a shot of sauerkraut juice, and build until you're at 2 tablespoons before every meal, 4 tablespoons, and once you're comfortable with it, eat to your heart's content. But if you do experience any digestive discomfort, just back off a little bit. You're just getting used to, you're changing your inner ecosystem in a really wonderful, powerful way. Any questions?
How did you make the ginger bug?
Grated ginger, palm sugar, filtered water. You can find a recipe for that online as well. Now this, since you do get so many floaties, I shake it often. And this will get a white film every once in a while. Shake it down and it redissolves itself. And then you can filter that out. You can put a little bit more sugar in it, You can just put it in another jar, would even work. Put new sugar in, leave it out till it's room temperature, put it in the refrigerator, and that's when you get that really wonderful effervescent kind of drink.
What do you think of the starter cultures? I see something people are selling for vegetables like a starter culture.
Yeah, good question. Yes, they are. Again, everything has its advantages. So what I've experienced and what I have read from some other fermentationalists is working with the native cultures that are right on that plant. If you've got something good, you can usually create a product that's going to have a longer shelf life. If you have a flavor that you really liked, you can take part of that batch or that liquid and put it into starting your next fermentation. Sometimes that affects the shelf life too. Starter cultures are absolutely brilliant when you're dealing with something like maybe you've taken the peel off an apple and you don't have any of that outer surface area anymore. If you're dealing, pineapple is a perfect example. Then a starter culture or a probiotic capsule, but not all probiotic capsules can be used. Most of them need enteric coating for the bacterial strains to get where they need to in your digestive system. The Alka-Pharma probiotic uses bacterial resistant strains, so those are perfect to use into culture. So that's what this was made with. Yes, our Alka-Pharma probiotics. I emulsified it into some cherry concentrate and then put that probiotic liquid over the apples and fennel. I'll send you a recipe as well. You can use walnuts and 5-spice blend, whatever you want to do with that. So that's a circumstance where a starter culture is recommended if you're using the inside of a fruit or vegetable. Also beneficial if you're looking for very specific bacterial strains. Let's say we're working against Candida. These are all powerful for working against Candida. But if you want to know that you're getting some acidophilus, for example, open up a capsule that has acidophilus. If you want K2, look for like Mercola's starter that has particular K2 in it, which we're looking into getting as well. All right, well, a couple things I want to do now. I want to have everybody put your name down on a little slip here, and I'm going to do a quick drawing to give away a bag of Tally Farms vegetables. And while we're working on that, here is an email list that will include what you're interested in. If you want me to email out the recipes, if you're interested in knowing when we get in raw sauerkraut, charcoal, filtering lids, whatever it is. And then here are some of the recipes if you're interested in looking through. These are the recipes that I'll be emailing out. And then I have a couple of things to sample. Here's some Inner Eco original fresh coconut water. And I have some sauerkraut juice as well. And it's good to have something on hand when you don't want to make it yourself.
So this is cultured coconut water? Is that what it is?
Yeah, this is probiotic. It's fermented coconut water, which you can do your own too. Perfect, thank you. Done.
All right.